Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Inner West Council's community briefing about the Haberfield Defence land. My name is Peter Gainson. I'm the General Manager at the Inner West Council. Shortly, I'll be introducing tonight's briefing, but firstly, I'd like to acknowledge the Gadigal and Wongal peoples of the Eora Nation, who are our traditional custodians of the land. I'd like to pay respect to Aboriginal elders, past, present, and acknowledge their young people who will be our future leaders. Just before we start, I'd like to quickly run through some housekeeping points about tonight's briefing. After the presentations, we'll be inviting you to submit written questions using the Q&A tool. You'll see the icon at the top of your screen. As attendees, you won't be using your microphone or cameras in the meeting, and you won't be accessing the chat function. You'll be able to use the Q&A tool. So there's a Q&A button, use that, put the question in, and we'll do our best to get through them all. We've allocated about 30 to 45 minutes for questions at the end, and I'll be moderating the questions. We won't publish anything that we really want you to put your name in, and we just need to moderate that because we're going to record it and it'll be kept. So I've got to be mindful of defamation when we do publish anything. Just following on to that, a note about privacy. We're recording this meeting and it'll be available in a few days' time on Council's website. If your comment is broadcast, your name will be visible to the live online audience, as well as future viewers of this recording. So by providing your name to this online meeting, you consent to your name being visible as well. In a minute, I'm going to hand over. We've got one expert speaker and a number of staff here to answer questions. We also have the ward councillors that are on the line tonight. We have Councillor Margarita de Cruz, Councillor Victoria Rosidi, and Councillor Lucille McKenna that are on the line. And we'll start with Kerry Hunt is going to be our first speaker. She's our building certification manager of the Inner West Council. She has a wealth of experience when it comes to dealing with assessments of construction certificates and building certificates and the like. We also have a number of staff in attendance who can answer questions. We've got Graham Palmer, our Acting Director of Planning, James Ogg, our Stormwater and Assets Planning Coordinator on the line, as well as Martin Amy, our Acting Manager of Development Assessment, Jai Reid, our Team Leader of Development Assessment, and Michael Tay, the Coordinator of Public Trees. So once we give you the presentation, the ward councillors get the opportunity to speak as well, and then we'll go to questions, and we hope we've brought enough staff here to answer any questions that may arise tonight. If we can't answer them, we'll then find an answer and moderate it and put it online later on. So I will now hand over to Kerry Hunt, our Building Certification Manager, who will now present.
Good evening, everybody, and welcome to this presentation in relation to the Army land at 140A Hawthorne Parade in Haberfield. I've prepared a presentation. I'm a building certifier, not necessarily a PowerPoint maker. However, I think that what we're trying to do today is really to give you some fairly technical information in relationship to the current situation and background to the Army land and how it was where we came from DA's modifications, works that were carried out, remediation that was carried out, and that the current applications that are before us at the moment relating to a modification that was submitted to Council in 2013. So the first slide basically is the areas of where the works are going to be carried out, and I'll just run through the. I don't have control over the slides, so someone else has control over the slides. So if we can just wait a minute. So the areas in red are the junction of O'Connor Street and Deacon Street, O'Connor Lane, which is a small lane which runs down from the top of the site through to the edge of the land. A small section, the section that is shown hatched below the laneway, is an overland flow path from the back of Tresita Street. So next slide, please. So we're just going to run through, there's been a lot of public interest in relationship to the land. And what we're trying to do is we've been dealing with lots of questions from local residents. We've had some public, the ABC has done an article, there's been several other articles in it. And what I'm trying to do today is basically go through some of the major issues that people have brought up to try and to explain in a fairly technical way things like the actual works that have been carried out, the flooding risks, where the drainage has actually been installed, what site establishment is going to be done by the defence contractors, trees in Deakin and O'Connor Street, tree protection zones and methods, remediation, and then the next steps. Next slide, please. So the background is that the land was actually rezoned from special purposes for the Army to residential in 1997. And then there was an approved development consent for the land to be subdivided into 21 residential lots and a central lot to be dedicated as public open space, which was approved in December 2001. A construction certificate was issued by a private certifier, and extensive drainage works and other infrastructure works, including roadways, lighting, was carried out in early 2003 through to about November 2003. The site was also remediated between 2003 and 2004, and we have on file various state audit or site audit statements which have been provided for the use of the land for residential purposes. It's a complex thing about remediation, and I'll talk a little bit further about that later on in the presentation. The lots were sold at auction by Defence. However, Ashfield Council did not issue a subdivision certificate, and then asked for additional extensive flood studies and modelling to reduce the flooding concerns on the site. So the development consent from 2001 has been activated. It has not lapsed, which means it still can be actioned as substantial works commenced. An approval in principle has been granted for the drainage upgrade works by way of the modification, which was approved by Ashfield Council in 2013. There were several other Section 96 applications preceding this, where negotiations were carried out between Defence and Council for various drainage designs to alleviate some of the potential flooding on the site. Next slide, please. So negotiations, as I say, for the stormwater system continued over several years, and it makes some very complex reading through the council files and council meetings in relationship to those negotiations about the designs and the best way to deal with potential flooding on the site. So Defence over the several years has approached council postulating various things, including a pre-DA, which was in 2019 for construction of defence housing on the site. They will not be carrying through with that. Council has also had a couple of mayoral minutes in relation to donation of the land. However, the Minister of Defence has said that cannot be done and can only be sold at market rate, and the ABC News valued that just 2 or 3 days ago between $40 and $60 million. So what council has in front of it at the moment are 2 applications. One is for a roadworks permit for the upgrading of the drainage works in Deakin and O'Connor Street, and some internal works for the increase of pipe capacity to O'Connor Lane and an overland flow path between lots, it's actually lots 10 and 11. Next slide, please. So Defence's role in this is quite significant. They are the owner of the land. They are the applicant for the DA consent. They have benefit of the consent, and they are the they have obtained approval from a parliamentary committee to advance the development of the 21 lot subdivision. So they have been in negotiation with council officers over several years in relationship to the leading up to this, and they now have actually put applications in with detailed technical information by reputable hydraulic and civil consultants and drainage contractors to undertake the works for the development consent. So communication, I know that this is quite a hot topic in the sense of the fact that Defence had developed a quite detailed communication plan earlier in the year, which was interrupted by COVID. They were going to do door-to-door information sessions, especially to those properties that are most affected by it around the site in Deacon Street, O'Connor Street, and in adjacent to Darragh Lane, and in on Hawthorne Parade as well. They've given, there is a dedicated website, they've letterboxed an information brochure, which I'm sure you have all seen. Council also has a hot topics on it, and obviously that this session today is also to give you some more information in relationship to what's happening around the site. Next slide, please. So the roadworks permit has detailed drainage upgrading works proposed to Deacon and O'Connor Street. There was a design approved as part of the 2013 modification, and so therefore approval in principle has been granted already by the approval of the Section 96 application assessed it by Ashfield Council in 2013. What Defence has done in the recent times, though, is actually gone through and investigated the services within the roads. They've potholed, which means that they've actually located where there is a 100-year-old sewer main that runs that transverses the bottom of O'Connor Street, and so that they have had to redesign the works to avoid that sewer main. Otherwise, it would have meant a lot more extra work to encase that sewer and to move around it. So the current plan is also a much better improvement on the plans because it avoids all the majority of the structural root zones of the street trees, and it would not require the rediversion of the sewer main. Next slide, please. So this is particularly hard to see, and without the ability to use my cursor. This is actually the design for the works in Deacon and O'Connor Street. So the small green circles are actually the trunks of the brush box trees. The red dotted circles are the structural root zones for those trees, and this has all been mapped very specifically by Defence and Defence contractors and the designers from Cardno to ensure that whatever the design is for the pits, great inlets, curbing, and the big culverts basically avoid all structural root zones of the brush box trees and the jelly palms which are on the lower part of the site. Next slide, please. This is an aerial view of that, so you can see which trees are particularly indicated there. So the trees that we're looking at are the two in Deacon Street and the one on O'Connor Street, and the two jelly palms, which you can't quite see. So the remainder of all the trees that have the yellow ribbons around them moving up through Deacon Street, there is no impact or no intention to go anywhere near those trees. There is a small section where there will be a compound. However, the trees have been very carefully plotted on the design, and the stormwater works that are proposed are intended to completely avoid or cause any impact to those trees. So we just want to give that reassurance. It's gone through our arborists, it's gone through consulting arborists, and there's been a lot of work done to ensure that the trees are not impacted. Next slide, please. Flooding risks and flood mitigation works. So there is a flood risk identified for the land, there is for O'Connor Street, Deacon Street, and the majority of Hawthorne Parade. So there is a Council's Hawthorne Canal flood study, which is fairly recent, and that has been used, as well as extensive modelling, and the latest modelling basically to try and model what would happen during various rainfall events and what will occur by the increase of the drainage works upstream to take that down through this property and to discharge into Hawthorne Canal. So it is acknowledged that there still will be overland flows through the site during high intensity rainfall events, including the adjoining properties, but it is reduced by up to 10 to 20% due to the additional works of the drainage upstream in O'Connor and Deacon Street. So the levels have also been established for typical requirements for dwellings on individual sites. And if you just go to the next slide, please. So James might talk a little bit further about this, but the principle of floodplain development manual is not to prevent the development of flood-affected land in low hazard areas or to ameliorate all flooding prior to development, but to ensure that any development takes place is built to withstand flooding that can occur. So there has been, the model was built from some quite specific rainfall intensity hydrographs from the Australian Rainfall and Runoff Association and calibrated against historic flood events in accordance with New South Wales best practice. And in the hot topics, you can have a look at that Hawthorne Canal flood study, which is recent. Next slide. So this diagram here, and again, it's very technical, and I'm not a hydrologist, but however, what it does actually show is that the majority of the site, this two-thirds of the site are have affected by is basically H1. The yellow lines are H5, and as you can see, there's a high level of flow coming down O'Connor Street, which is in that top left-hand corner. It's very hard to see, but the laneway also has a small section of H5, as well as a small section on Darragh Lane and the top northeast corner of the properties as well. So by doing this modelling, if we can have the next slide, please. The Cardinaux and the consultants have done an indicative building footprint for what these aren't set in stone, but this is an indicative footprint for dwellings. The ones that are hatched are slab on ground, so they typically will potentially be single-storey slab on ground buildings. And as you can see, 14 of the sites are for slab on ground, and there are 7 sites. I'm going to count that now: 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, which will require a higher level and will be up on piers. And they're obviously in the higher levels where the flooding may occur. What I think is important to look on this slide as well is the fact that the blue area extends all the way up the catchment area through O'Connor Street, Deacon Street, and several other streets around in the high levels there of Haberfield. Across through Tresidder Street, there's lots of H5 elements there. The tennis courts obviously get affected as well, but also all of the houses in Hawthorne Parade are also flood affected during these high intensity rainfall events. So there are sites in there, so all the sites that have no colour on them do not have any flood levels or are not flood affected in the same extent. Next slide, please. The question was asked at the councillor meeting the other day about where the existing pipelines are, and again, without the advantage of having the cursor. If you move to the top, right in the middle at the top there, Renata. Nope. Yeah, come back. Yep. So that is the junction between Deacon and O'Connor Street, and you can see the stormwater pits and stormwater lines in there. Where the cursor is sitting on at the moment is at the top of the laneway. The blue hatched line going through the site is down the laneway, across where the public open space is. Yep, keep coming down. Across the park, there's another big junction pit. That is Darragh Lane that's going across now towards Hawthorne Parade, and then across the reserve and discharging through two quite large culverts into Hawthorne Canal. There's also another line that comes through the back of Tresidder Street again, which is where the overland flow path is going to be be connected through as well. So that's what's existing on site at the moment, And the works that are going to be carried out will be carried out on that junction to enhance and increase the size of the inlets and the culverts of that junction of Deakin and O'Connor Street, and doubling up the capacity of the pipelines through the O'Connor Laneway. The remainder of the pipelines will be the same, but it increases that capacity to pull water down during those high intensity events in underneath the site to discharge into Hawthorne Canal. Next slide, please. This is from the roadworks permit, which will show where the contractors, so Defence have contracted to BGIS, which is the old Brookfields, who have then also contracted Protec to undertake the actual civil and drainage and hydraulic works on the site. So this is where the site establishment will be. They will have a compound there, which will have a site shed in it, toilets, similar things to that. The majority of the works will be carried out by a maximum 18-ton excavator, and will be carried out from the top end of the site. So I know that these pipes have been delivered on site through Darragh Lane. That was an aberration, and it was unfortunate that it happened. Defence didn't know about it, BGIS didn't know about it, Council didn't know about it, and the first thing we heard about it was concern from local residents in blocking of the road, standing outside there, and then backing across the reserve to actually get it in. And that will not happen again. That was something that, because of COVID, there's a real shortage at the moment of materials. Protec, the subcontractors, decided that they could obtain some, and so they brought them on site, and that was a very, very unfortunate situation that occurred. But all of we've got work method statements for how the works will be carried out in O'Connor Lane, and they will be carried out from the top end, from O'Connor Street. And I know Councillor De Cruz, you asked that question at the councillor briefing on Tuesday. Next slide, please. So the trees in O'Connor Street, and Brett, I have plagiarised your lovely photos of the wonderful tawny frogmouse. They're a fantastic bird. Council, the defence contractors, definitely the local residents are all cognizant of the importance of the street trees, of the brush box street trees and the jelly palms for Deakin and O'Connor Street. So the paramount thing is ensuring that the trees are well looked after. So one of the things that the design actually did was to redesign it to ensure that there was a lesser impact on the trees and the structural root zones. And the slide that we referred to very early on in the piece with the tree protection zones actually shows that there is that everything is outside the structural root zones. Any excavation near or adjacent to any trees will be supervised by the consultant arborist from contractors, as well as council tree officers, and I'm sure that there'll be concerned residents watching every spade that is dug into the ground as well. So we're very, very aware of that. We understand the concerns. Brush box street trees and that heritage value of those beautiful arching trees that cover across the roadways is really important. And I understand that there's been some recent works done with bitumising up on Barton Street and across the top there as well, that to ensure that there's no impact on the street trees. So there will be supervision for it, and special measures have been undertaken to ensure minimal impacts on the street trees. So we can reassure you of that. Next slide, please. This is an extract from the consultant arborist report that's been examined by Council's tree assessment officers in relation to protection zones around all of the trees that are adjacent to the site as well, which is fairly typical of what would be done for any construction works adjacent to any street trees and protection. We take this incredibly seriously. Next slide, please. So remediation, again, this is a very hot topic. It's a complex, each of the site audit statements runs between 138 and 150 pages each. Defence is also at the moment collating a timeline associated with the remediation of the site. There are some photos that are on there, and I'm sure that the local residents would have remembered the removal of the majority of the soil off the site and the importation of around 15,000 cubic metres of virgin rip sandstone. Apparently it came from the Grace Brothers site in Bondi Junction and a couple of other sites there from about 8 to 9 metres below ground level. There was some conditions put on some of the site audit statements which required some further remediation and monitoring of groundwater near lots 1 and 2, which are adjacent to the bottom of Hawthorne Parade. This is still a work in progress, and we will be providing some more information once we've received that information, both from Council's files, which are very complex, as well as from Defence and the Defence contractors, who also are going back through their files for nearly 20 years ago to have a look at what was actually occurring on the site. But there are site audit statements which allow for the lots to be used for residential purposes, for the roadways, and for the open space for the parkland, which is that central section. Next slide, please. So the next steps, this is where we're sort of at the moment. Council officers are currently have 2 applications before them, and we'll have a 3rd one. So a roadworks permit step 1, which is our design one, is being assessed at the moment with the road access team, and that's for all works external to the site. So that's the works in Deakin and O'Connor Street. And there's a modified construction certificate being assessed in relation to any of the works inside the boundaries of the site. So that's in O'Connor Lane, and for the required overland flow between lots 10 and 11. Once they have been approved and all the conditions of consent have been satisfied, which are relative to those particular applications, construction works will be undertaken, including the tree protection. We've been told it's approximately for 38 weeks, and the internal works will be carried out, and there will be work method statements for all of those. Once those works have been completed, certification will be submitted for all the construction works, which includes everything that was done in the past in 2003, 2004, prior to the handover of the infrastructure works. Next step, please. A new subdivision application will need to be lodged by Defence. So that, again, there are specific conditions, and it's the way lots of conditions so lots of development consents are separated out, that there's certain conditions that get satisfied at different stages of the work. Once the conditions that are relative to the subdivision certificate have been satisfied, which includes contributions and certification for handover, CCTV inspection of all the established works, test certificates for road works, electrical installation, Section 73 certificates for water and sewerage, all of that certification will be collated. At that point, and only at that point, will Defence be able to actually then get the individual lots registered with the Land Registry Service, and we've been told that they then will put those lots up for sale to individual lot owners. And I know that there's some concern about what will be built on the site, but any new lot owners will be required to submit individual development applications for the proposed dwellings. There will be conditions in relationship to flood levels, and obviously they will need to comply with the Ashfield LEP 2013 and the Inner West Comprehensive DCP in relation to the Haberfield area. And next slide. And that's my presentation. I'm sorry it's so long and complex. It is It is a very interesting site, has some very interesting history associated with it, and it obviously is a bit of concern for local residents, but we are doing our due diligence to ensure that proper assessment is carried out for the applications that are in front of us in accordance with the approved DA and the modification. So thank you very much.
Thanks very much for that, Kerry. So before we go, so I've got 2 ward councillors on the line that are going to speak, and the first ward councillor that's going to speak is Councillor Margarita de Cruz.
Thanks, Peter.
Yeah.
Yep. Thanks, Peter, and thanks, Kerry, for that detailed presentation. Just to clarify, the question I actually asked was about the work compound in Deakin Avenue and O'Connor Street, and to see what impact that would have. And the community has lots of questions, so I won't take up too much time, but there's issues with contamination, flooding on the site and leading up to the site. Ownership of the stormwater is something I'm interested in, and ownership of the parkland, I guess, within the site. And whether the documents like the contamination studies will be made public. So I think for transparency, we need to be able to see all those documents, and whether they'll be uploaded onto the DA system for the public viewing. So I'll leave it at that. So thank you for putting this on, and I think the community has a lot of questions.
Thank you, Councillor de Cruz. The next councillor I have is Councillor Victoria Rossetti to speak. Are you there, Vicky? I might have to come back to Victoria. All right. No, all right. We might. I might give the councillors a chance to say something at the end when we're wrapping up. But I'll just give Councillor Rossetti one more chance. So, Councillor Rossetti, are you have trouble with your connection? It's your turn to speak. Okay. What I'll do is I'll go into the Q&A and I'll give the councillors, if they want to say anything at the end, opportunity. So I'm going to do my best to get through it. We do have plenty of time. There's plenty of questions here. So the first question from Brett is, if the land is sold and cannot be built on, who will be sued? Will it be council or the defence? Look, I might say that at the end of the day, it's a matter for the purchaser. They'll be buying a property, I'm assuming, that's got that this work's been done. It's up to them to work out how they develop it. It'd probably be an issue. If they did have an issue, they could probably talk to defence about it. And as I said, it's a matter for each individual lot owner. The work that they've done isn't being done for, say, the land can't be developed. So they've got enough conditions on there to try and solve the stormwater problem. So, second question, which will be one from Brett again, and this will go to Kerry Hunt. Kerry, is Inner West Council satisfied that the land is free from contaminants?
As I said, that the site audit statements, there's a very complex history associated with them. There is some contaminants associated with and some conditions on the site audit statement relating to the laneway, and part of that is ensuring that there's no soil disturbed, or if it is, then it's not stockpiled on site. Because this is an area that the additional pipelines are going through. At the moment, it's obviously a concrete footpath. And we're looking at that. That's the work method statement that's been submitted from the contractors at the moment to ensure that they do comply with those conditions that are on the site audit statement. As far as the parkland goes, it is clear for residential use. You can grow veggies on it. You can do a whole lot of other things. For some reason, you can't keep poultry on it, so there won't be any poultry on the public open space. For the remainder of the other site, the other lots, yes, they have all been cleared for residential purposes. The roadways have also been cleared for residential purpose. I don't know why that happens like that, but yes, we do. We're working through the site audit statements. We're working with Defence and their experts in there because they have a lot more information on their files in relationship to it. As I say, each of the site audit statements is between 130 and 150 pages long, and they go across several years where certain parts of the sites were remediated at different times and site audits were done. They refer to 15 to 20 other investigations, remediation action plans. It's a very complex issue under SEP 55. So yes, we are pretty confident, but we would like to just do a bit more further information, a bit more digging on that before we make an unequivocal statement.
Bit more digging, pardon the pun, Kerry.
Thanks, Peter.
So that's all right. What will the Cardno 2020 flood study? Will the Cardno, another one from Brett? Will the Cardno 2020 flood study be peer reviewed, or will IW, so will Inner West Council accept it without question? I might go to. Is that one for James?
Yeah, that one would be for me.
Thanks, mate.
Yeah, so there's a couple of parts to answer that question. The modelling that Cardno have been doing is built from the Hawthorne Canal flood model that was built for council, which itself was peer reviewed as part of our Hawthorne Canal flood study, our Hawthorne Canal flood risk management plan. So the model itself has been calibrated against known flooding events and has been peer reviewed. So we know that the model itself is a viable and valid model. The modelling that has been done since is just about looking at what the impacts of those new pipes are, and is being reviewed internally. It's not being taken to an external consultant for a second review, but it's being reviewed by myself and another flood expert within council.
Thank you, James. The next question is from Josepha. What has been the response from the Defence Department representation to return the West Haberfield community? Look, I might answer that. Over a number of years has made undertakings or has made representations to the federal government about this land. They seem committed to doing what they're proposing at the moment. There's been some discussions. There's been to a number of successive governments on this. The council over the years has done that, and they seem to be pressing on with what they're proposing at this stage.
If I can just add to that, Peter, we did get a letter back from Christopher Pyne when he was the Minister of Defence, and apparently under the Excess Defence Lands Act, that the land cannot be returned to the community other than by market value. So that's why they need to sell the land. They don't have a choice. There's a particular act that doesn't do that.
Thank you, Kerry. This question's from Helen. Works will be undertaken into Deakin Avenue, and it says yes. Will, I suppose it means will work. So slide 1 didn't really reveal that. Does that make sense to you, Kerry?
Yeah. If you look at, I don't know whether Renata can bring up the one where it shows the specific works, that very detailed plan that was about 3 or 4 slides into the presentation. And it will show that there is a couple of road pits on either side in Deakin Avenue at the top, near the junction between Deakin and O'Connor Street. So yes, there is some works there, Helen. Yep. So just go up a bit. No, sorry, that's the right plan. So the blue pits that are on both sides of the road there of Deakin Avenue. So there's 3 pits that are shown there, and those other ones are right at the junction at the corner there. So the blue one's a bit higher up from that. Works in Deakin Avenue. That's in O'Connor Street, but yeah. Okay, does that answer your question, Helen?
Yep, that sounds good. Sorry, I've just lost my little Q&A. There we go. will Defence and the Inner West Council guarantee, this is from Brett, that the trees in Deakin and O'Connor will survive? If not, why not? So I might go to Kerry and then maybe to Michael, if that is all right for you first, Kerry? Or is it a Michael
sure.
one?
Well, there's a bit of a Michael one and a bit of a Kerry one as well. I mean, guarantees in life are some things that it's very, very unfortunate that there was a throwaway phrase made by a contractor during a site inspection, which he had no right to say and no authority to say and no evidence to say that there would be impacts on the trees. We've been very, very careful with the consulting arborists and our arborists and the design itself in relationship to what will happen adjacent to those trees in those structural root zones. The design has been changed and modified extensively to ensure that there is no impact on the root zones. There will be any works that will be adjacent to those will be dug either by hand or by a trenching method or a small bucket. So they will be very, very carefully excavated. And brush box trees are incredibly robust. I made the comment the other day that they're the tree that Ausgrid just cut the hearts out of, and they all still survive. So I'm not sure what a guarantee is, Brett, but we are very confident that there will be no impacts on the trees.
I might just add to that, Kerry, if you can hear me, that we're also dealing with living dynamic organisms as well. We will be stipulating conditions under the current works permit that the developer or the contractor would need to adhere to as well, such as compliance with the current arborist report. There will be a requirement that under AS 4970, which is the Protection of Trees and Development Site Standard, the contractor must adhere to those guidelines as well. But there will also be the requirement for milestone certification reports. At the commencement of works, we've already got that report. We would also expect a report for any of the works to be oversaw by the project arborist and provide a report at that point, and then also a milestone completion report that the trees are in as good a condition at the beginning of work as well.
All right, that's great. I'm conscious I've got a lot of questions from one family, and I want to make sure I get everyone in. I might just do one from Brett, and then I'll just get one more from Brett. Will the proposed Deakin and O'Connor drainage solve the flooding in 43 and 45 O'Connor Street? One for James.
Yeah, that's one for me, and it's a complicated answer in that what the new drainage will do is reduce flooding for those two properties. It will not remove flooding for those properties. It's a combination of the lay of the land, the type of flooding that occurs in the inner west. It's not the flooding we see in terms of breaking of riverbanks. It is overland flooding. It is when water exceeds the capacities of our pipes and comes through the low points of the land. Kerry shared a topographical map earlier, which shows that there's two local valleys coming through this area. One that's coming, which does match the location of the pipes. There is a local valley in Kingston Street and a local valley in O'Connor Street. Now, the pipes themselves are designed to take the more this is not just at this site, but it is across, in terms of across council-wide, pipes are designed to take the more common events, but they don't have the capacity for the 1% flooding event, that one in what used to be called the 1 in 100 years storm event. So though there is a reduction in flooding in the more common events, we do see a smaller reduction in that same planning event, that 1% or that 1 in 100 year event.
James, can I just add to that, because I got a couple of other questions. It just disappeared actually, just hang Marinol asked, so is the flooding going to be reduced by new drainage on O'Connor and Deakin by about 10 or 20%? Is that a...
Yes, that's correct. The depths of flooding in O'Connor and at that intersection and through 43 and 45 are in the realm, like, gets to a maximum of 30 centimetres to 50 centimetres, and then up to 70 centimetres on O'Connor Street. We're talking about reductions in that 1% event of about 10 centimetres, which is where Kerry gets that 10 to 20% reduction.
Just further to that, Alison Casey asked, the driveways at 43 and 45 O'Connor Street will still be dangerously flooded from time to time after the works. Will council look at mitigating the flow of floodwater further up the hill to stop the regular damage to these properties?
Yeah, so this would be separate to the works here, but there is a long-term plan for flood mitigation works all across council. We've got at this stage flood risk management plans that have been adopted all across council, including the Hawthorne Canal flood risk management plan. As part of that plan, there were upgrades further upstream in O'Connor Street and Kingston Street to capture more of that overland flooding and putting it into pipes, which means that those peak levels are reduced further.
Yep, great. Excellent. I'm conscious I've got 57 questions and a bit over half an hour. I'm going to work my hardest to get through all the questions, but if not, I apologise, and we'll try and provide some written comments. But I'm going to work hard to try and get through them all. Damien P, it's one for Martin. With sites on piers, this creates a privacy issue with existing homes backing onto the land. Full visibility into the yards. How high are these piers?
I don't think we're sure exactly what the height of the piers are going to be, but in terms of just general privacy, we'll take that into account with each DA that's lodged, and then if there's needed to be some treatments there or any changes to the layouts and things like that, we'll definitely take that into account, and personally to those ones that are obviously higher to the lower ground ones as well, to ensure that the privacy of existing residents is retained.
Great, thank you. Another one from Michelle. Hang on. Is the drainage going to be upgraded in Kingston Street to stop the water running into O'Connor and Deakin? You might have answered this, James.
Yep. The Kingston Street drainage, let me just double check that I'm talking about the right section. The Kingston Street drainage isn't being upgraded as part of this project, as part of the Defence Force works. But as I said, it's been one of my previous answers, there are, as part of our flood risk management plan for Hawthorne Canal, there are upgrades in other areas of this space to get more water into the pipes and less in terms of overland flow, but it's not being proposed to be upgraded as part of this project.
Okay, thank you. Excuse me, we've done that one. Okay. What impact will the local drainage works, this is from Damien, have on local traffic conditions and access into homes and streets on O'Connor? James.
I can probably answer that. I'm not directly involved with the roadworks permit or the assessment of the construction traffic management plan, but I have been working with our road access team who do look after our roadworks permits. They've currently gone back to the contractor who's building the works, and we're seeking to work out a way that allows the road to at least be partially open at all times, to create, and that would be subject to traffic control, but we're trying to get a solution that doesn't require the intersection to be closed and detours to be provided. We're looking for a methodology that allows for the road to be open at all times, and continuing access provided to residents.
Great, excellent. Thanks, James. Next one from Helen Burton. Is there a bond placed on each tree? If not, why not? Kerry, or is that a Michael?
There is bonds that are required up to $160,000 for the site, and though none of those will be released until such time as all matters have been satisfied. Michael might want to comment on whether or not there's individual bonds on trees, but as I say before, council is confident that with the methods of the arborist and with our tree assessment officers and the design, that there will be very little impact on the trees.
Okay, Michael, is there anything you want to say?
No, I'd say the bond covers the complexity of the works. If there was a significant breach, it would become a compliance issue as well.
Great, excellent, thank you. One from Joanne. How did the pipe delivery team get through the locked gates from Hawthorne Parade? Someone had to give the drivers access.
If I could answer that, they sat outside there for a while, and then they contacted Protect, contacted BGIS, who are the main contractors, and someone let them in. But again, no one knew that they were turning up, and it was unfortunate that occurred, because it created a lot of issues, and really didn't help with the confidence from Defence with either council or the local residents that they were going to do the right thing. So yes, it did go through to BGIS, which is the main contractors commissioned by Defence.
Yep, great, excellent. All righty. Another one from Brett. How can the CC 2021-074 be approved without confirmation that the sites are free of the combined risk of flood and contamination? Kerry?
So the modified construction certificate deals with the works in the laneway. As I said, there's a site-specific work method statement which is addressing the conditions that are on that site audit statement in relationship to how those works are carried out. And we do have site audit statements which clear the other sites, the other land up in 10 and 11. Again, we're still looking into those matters. We still have to do our due diligence, and we will be looking further into those as well. So I'm waiting on some information back from Defence into relationship to those specific questions.
Excellent. Thank you, Kerry. Stuart Reed's given us this question. I think this is a Michael Tay one. Why are the structural root zone diameters for the brush box trees with far wider canopy diameters the same size as those for jelly palms, far smaller diameter canopy? That looks very odd.
A lot of project arborists, when they calculate the structural root zones and the TPZs, they apply them to horticultural, to tree structures. Palms act very differently. If you look at the root system of a standard tree, they spread laterally like an octopus, and we're able to calculate what the structural root zone is, which is the minimum area required to maintain the stability and anchorage of the tree. Palms act very differently, and they have what they refer to as an adventitious clumping root system. So if they've given a generous amount of the structural root zone of TPZ for those palms, that's probably more beneficial for them. But from an arboricultural perspective, we can actually encroach much closer to a palm because they have this clumping ball root system as well. So it's not something of great concern, but those are usually calculated through existing methodologies, which are fixed to AS 4970.
Okay, thank you, Michael. That's a good answer. A question from Susan Jackson-Stapowski. The red subcontractor rectangles in Deakin appear to conflict with the tree root and canopy zones. maybe one for Michael again, or Kerry. Michael, do you have the answer to that?
Sorry, could you just repeat that again?
It was apparently there's some rectangles that red subcontractor rectangles in Deakin appear to conflict with the tree root canopy zones. I'm assuming with anything that the tree root canopy zones that are will be protected and then become above the design. I'm assuming, putting my engineering hat on, I would assume that anything they've done out, first of all, they've had to protect the trees, and then any of the construction works would be out of that. But I'm happy for Michael and Kerry to lean in on that question.
I think it's just a concept plan at the moment to sort of indicate a general location of that. But when they actually go to do site establishment, they'll be very careful to ensure that there's no impact on the canopy, and to ensure that there's very little stuff going in the compound, because they'll bring any machinery or what have you in as required. Concrete trucks and all those other sorts of things won't be sitting in that compound. It will mostly just be a site shed, toilets, and some and some maybe the excavator when they need to have that sealed in on that compound during the night time. But it's just a concept plan at the moment. You're on mute, Pete.
Thank you. Thanks, Jerry. The next question is, I'll do another one from, I'm just conscious I've got 55 questions still to get through. We're pedaling hard. Thank you for the team for answering these. One for Michael, has the proposed method of excavation and arborist supervision been used before? And if so, if you know where, but did the trees survive? So one to Michael.
Yeah, no, look, the Inner West Council, we do a lot of civil work upgrades over in Annandale Street, over in Annandale, some locations where we've worked within 5 radial metres of trees, and provided that the works are carried out with a set of eyes, like with a project arborist out there, and it's done through non-destructive excavation, there's no reason why the tree should be damaged, whether that's manual, air knife, back truck, and they can go in there with a mini excavator provided that they have a spotter on there constantly looking up tree roots.
Okay. What a follow-up from Brett. What happens if one of the brush box dies? What's the penalty as a result of development? Is there? Do we know the answer to that, Michael or Kerry?
It would be a compliance issue, and there probably would be penalties associated with it if there's any damage to it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I could jump in there.
Oh, Graham? Yep. Thank you, Graham.
Yeah, so obviously,
Acting Director of Planning. Yep.
So any damage would be investigated, and if council were to obtain sufficient evidence to determine any breaches had occurred, either deliberately or negligently, then council would consider its legal options at that stage, very much on a case-by-case basis. But the outcome could be anything from warnings, fines, right through to full prosecution if it was deliberate in the worst case scenario.
Right. Excellent. Thanks. Thanks, Graham. Okay. Another one from Helen. Isn't there a new DCP specifically for this land? It's either a Kerry or a Martin one.
Yeah, not at the moment, Peter. And there's also a question there about the LEP as well. There's no site-specific LEP at this stage being prepared in the chat.
Okay. Thank you. From Stuart Reid, in 2013, Ashfield Council gave in principle approval. So what detail is yet to be approved? Everyone to Kerry or Martin?
So anything to do with the development consent is a concept or a principal approval for it. When it comes to the roadworks permit or the construction certificate, then all of the detailed matters that need to be taken into consideration and compliance with the conditions of consent then have to be satisfied. So you do have a staging of how a DA is assessed and approved, and then there is much more specific and very detailed technical information, compliance with various Australian standards, work practice methods, compliance with conditions of consent that then need to be submitted as the second stage of the process. The third stage is obviously the construction and inspection process of it all. The fourth stage would then be what typically would be as part of an occupation certificate, where certification of all of the works is actually carried out. In this case, it would be the subdivision certificate as well as an occupation certificate, even though it's actually for civil and drainage works that are occurring. So that certification would come in at the point before the subdivision certificate would be issued. So in principle is the concept. So the 2013 DA was, this is what we think will achieve the matters that need to be done. The roadworks permits now has this really specific design that has all the flood modelling, all of the testing to it, all of those other sorts of bits and pieces, the same as the construction certificate has very, very specific details submitted with it.
Yeah. Thank you, Kerry. The next question is, why was the site-specific DCP that included built forms was removed by IWC, Inner West Council, when the amalgamated DCP was done, and the original submitters weren't notified of the deletion? Martin, is that for you?
I probably was around at that time, but I don't know the answer to that specifically. I can only indicate that what will be lodged will be assessed on the current plans that we have, and what taken into consideration any of those controls and legislative requirements.
Okay.
Peter, it's Lucille. I almost think that it wasn't transferred into the 2013 documents with the new in 2013. I think that's what occurred, and of course that was very much there was huge amounts of consultation on that.
Yep. Thank you, Lucille. That's great.
I think.
Yeah, Councillor McKenna. So it's got a great history in the area and the site. We're going to miss her next term of council. Okie doke. Can you assure the residents? It's an anonymous one. Can you assure the residents adjacent to the site that the boundary trees on their land, as well as the trees on Army land, will be conserved, so no damage occurs to the roots, rendering the trees dangerous? Michael?
If I can answer that, Peter. So I think that what and I may be corrected on this. We've had a look at that. The works as executed plan that was done for the laneway where the major pipes were installed has been investigated by the Defence has an expert who has gone back through all their own files and council's files and looked at works as executed files. So there are two quite deep retaining walls that retain the sides of the laneway and a upside down culvert. So if you think about at the bottom, there's a U that goes like that, and then on the top there's a U that goes like that, and then the pipes sit in between it. What we think is that the trees that are adjacent to the laneway probably post-date the works associated with the retaining walls, and therefore that their root systems don't actually intrude into any of the work zone for the laneway. Obviously, the contractors, when they're starting excavating, will need to have a look at that. But from what we understand from the information provided on the files and the works as executed, is that those trees probably post-date the works that were carried out in the laneway back 20 odd years ago.
Yep. Thank you, Kerry. I'm just picking this anonymous one's got a few, and I'm trying to do questions that we haven't already answered. So my apologies if not every specific question will get answered. We're just going to do our best to try and give the community as much coverage as possible. This one's an interesting one for the anonymous, someone anonymous. The soil on the land was moved due to contamination because of the Army use, and infill from Bondi Westfield was used to recreate the levels. unsuccessfully as the levels do not replicate the prior level, they are much higher. The land will be disturbed again if it is built on, and has the level of contamination been determined to be safe for excavation with regard to airborne risk of dirt and dust affecting the neighbourhood. Sorry, it's a long one, Kerry, but it's about excavation, and with the excavation, will it disturb contaminated fill underneath?
And again, from what I understand from reading these very long, detailed site audit statements, and again, experts in defence are having a look at it, as well as we're having a look at it as well, is that that all of the fill that was brought into the site was validated. And topsoil was also validated, that they grew the grass in. So anyone undertaking an excavation into it is undertaking into validated fill. So any hot spots that were identified were removed and tested, as was the groundwater. But as I say, this is still a work in progress because they're quite complex, and we're obtaining some more information. And so rather than say unequivocal one way or another, I would rather just let us have a look at some further details and get some further details and come back to those people that are particularly interested in the remediation of the site, because it is a 20-year history on that.
Excellent, thanks, folks. I've still got 63 questions to do in 20 minutes, so I'm not going to get through them all, but so my apologies to everyone. What legislation requires the defence to sell excess land at market value? How does it prevent the this is from Angie, the defence donating the excess land to the community? And Vincent Sakari then said, what engagement does council have with the Minister of Defence? Well, we've written off more recently to Peter Dutton. We've also had a letter back, as Kerry alluded to, from Christopher Pine, who said that was their policy. We would love if the Defence wanted to donate it as community land and parkland. Council never not accept that, provided it's been remediated properly. It just doesn't seem to be on the table at this point in time. Great. Next question is, will a separate, from Jamie Shaw, will a separate LEP be formulated for the site? My concern is that the houses will be faked to look Federation, which is not appropriate in my opinion. One for Martin.
Yeah, I tend to agree with Jamie. I'm a bit nervous about that as well, but we've got current controls that hopefully deal with that at the moment. If things change, the DTP can change, but at this stage, the controls are there and they will lodge applications based on that, and we'll assess them based on those controls.
All right, and thank you. The anonymous person with the number that logged in with the number has declared his name is Stuart Clegg. Thanks, Stuart. And thanks for those questions. Here's an interesting, sorry, my questions are going up and down. I'm just trying to manage the Q&A here, so my apologies. Duncan Smith has said, if the land is not developed, will council still perform the drainage upgrade in order to alleviate the existing flooding issues in properties on O'Connor Street? One for James.
Yep. So the defence is definitely going ahead with the O'Connor Deacon Avenue works. The works I was talking about further up on O'Connor Street, we don't have an exact year for yet. One of the jobs we are doing at the moment is harmonising all the flood risk management plans that were both completed by the 3 previous councils and have been finished in the time since the Inner West Council has done, and creating that prioritisation list of works. As you may appreciate, we have a lot of areas in our council that are affected by the aged nature of our network and how it's quite small, with a lot of properties with a lot of areas requiring flood mitigation. So we've got a prioritisation list, but we are committed to doing those works over the next, within the next 10 to 20 years. But we can't do everything in the next 3 years. Sadly, we would love to, but it's millions upon millions of dollars to do everything. We're talking hundreds of millions.
And again, James, it's prioritised with risk So all of these things, council work out the risk of first human life and then damage to property, and that's how we prioritise across the LGA.
Yeah, it's been assessed based on what we call an annualised reduction, a reduction in annualised damages. So the average damage that would occur each, per year, each event, the damage that would occur in each event has been, but yeah, I'm getting a bit too technical, but yeah, it's based on risk and cost and benefit.
Great, thanks, James. And there was another question which just moved off my screen. I'm going to grab it again. My apologies. And it flows on for this, James. I might nearly answer it. That Catherine Dwyer asked whether Kerry said the historic events referenced when looking at flooding, but do we consider global warming when we do that? Will we consider that with the new LEP? James, can you just confirm that when you calculate your flooding levels that we're allowing for future global warming and climate change?
Each study has been calculated to include a few different ways that global warming could impact the results. It's part of the statistical variations that we do when we model that it's undertaken, looking at both an increase and a decrease of rainfall, because the impacts of climate change are quite varied. So it's more about a variation testing, and the variation, because the type of flooding is quite small in the terms of the overall impact to the overland flood levels, and well managed by what we call the freeboard that new developments are required to have above those modelled flood levels.
Great, excellent. One from, just bear with me. One from Daniela Catalano, who lives at the rear of 19 Kingston Street and has concerns about the work compound in Deakin Avenue for 38 weeks. Do we know where it's going to be situated? Will it impact parking outside of the house? And how large is the work compound? And how many people will be accessing it?
We could get some more. We can get some further information from the contractors associated with that, Peter. Because obviously, as I say, it's a concept plan at the moment, and that there's more specific details that we can obtain. Again, with a lot of these questions, is that some of the questions we can't actually answer. We're waiting on information, or can get clarification from Defence and their contractors and their subcontractors in relationship to answering some of those questions.
All right, thank you. I'm trying to scroll through. We've still got, I finally got it under 60 questions. We've answered 31, so the team's doing really well, but I'm conscious we've got only to 7:30. Yes. Okay. For drainage works, one from Damien P. For the drainage works, will there be permission for the works to be done out of hours? Any comments on that? Anyone?
No. That's my answer to it, since we do the out of hours permits, and no, there will not be. They will have to do them within the standard construction times.
Yeah, no worries. Okay, another one on time. Someone just said, can we, I'm sure Christopher Pine is correct, but can we please see evidence of the restriction onto the defence land? That's more of a comment. Helen Burton said, thank you to Michael Tay. Your questions have been excellent. Another one is, could IWC put a high-level program schedule for the remediation and drainage works up to lot sale? Do we know their timing? But we'll try and keep the community informed as much about the project as what, and make sure that they do. It's whether we can provide information on that. Kerry, I don't know if you've spoken to the engagement team about that.
No, we will be yeah, we will be putting as much information as possible on the website so that it is available for people to have a look at. There's a question there about the Defence will be doing door-to-door consultation and information sessions with everyone that is affected, especially those adjoining the laneway, because they will be probably most affected when the works are being carried out in the laneway. So the Defence has a lot of responsibility in relationship to undertaking information and providing door-to-door consultation with affected properties. So they will be asking us after this as to who are the best people to go and have a chat to, and we'll be providing, if that's okay with people, that if there's anyone that particularly wants a visit from Defence and their contractors, so that a lot of these things can be explained, they're happy to take on that, and we'll work with Council to ensure that any questions need to be answered by them will be answered by them.
Okay, Vince Sakari said, this is a bit technical. Why is the SRZ and not the TPZ being considered? The TPZ is much bigger. Sounds like one for Michael Tay, actually.
Yeah, look, the SRZ, the structural root zone, is the minimum area required to maintain the stability of the tree. The TPZ, which is typically the diameter at chest height, times by a distance of 12, is really the optimum area to maintain ongoing tree health. Depending on the nature of the works, you can allow various encroachments into the TPZ, much less so into the SRZ. Knowing what we know about brush box, I believe that the nature of the work and the methodology that the work will be undertaken will have very little impact on the trees. Bearing in mind that on a day-to-day basis, councils across the board do road resheeting programs. We do curb and gutter replacements and footpath replacements, all within the SRZ and the TPZ of our trees. So I believe that yes, it is a greater consideration. I believe the methodology is good.
Thank you very much. Okay. Let me see. Next question. So another one about if the land is going to be sold into 21 lots, what does the timing look like? I said, if we've got some information, we'll put it up. We'll put that on site. Another again about how long will the transfer of plot ownership happen to sit for the DA approval. So I still can't get below 60 questions. I think I'll be here. There's lots of, obviously lots of community interest in this, but there's a lot of similarities with lots of the questions. An interesting one from Deborah. I hope I get the pronunciation right, Darra, I think it's Darra Lane, be widened to provide two-way vehicle access? If not, how will vehicles access the site to the site work post-development and the sale of lots? Anyone across that? Kerry, are you across that?
Because the approval was done in 2000 and 2001, I think it's a matter that we probably will refer through to our traffic engineers to have a look at and a think about associated with that, because obviously things like no stopping zones and sight lines and all the rest of it is probably something that needs to be done. The land is restricted in Darragh Lane. That was the original access handle through into the Army land, and obviously there is development either side of that laneway, so there's no possibility of increasing the width of it, but there may be need to put some traffic measures into place. And I think that to try and answer that properly, we should have a chat to our traffic engineers and see if they can come up with some other solutions. And I'm sure that we'd be able to talk to Defence as part of the subdivision to maybe install some other measures to ensure that that's not a problem. It's an interesting thing, because 20 years ago things were obviously very much different than they are now as far as traffic intensity.
Yeah, excellent. Thank you, Kerry. I'm conscious of the time. At 7:25, in 2 minutes, I was going to go to closing remarks. Look, I'll just say that some things, there's questions about how detailed our drainage model is. But James, my experience with that drainage model that Cardino's done, we've gone to great levels to try and get as accurate as possible across the area. We've probably got a better way than we've ever had at calculating and try and predicting the flood depths. We actually go to the trouble of validation, so we come up with predictive models to work out how deep the flow is, and then we'll go and check in stormwater events and ask residents about how deep the flow was and validate to calibrate our models. So we try to do it as best we can. I think that it's probably been more accurate nowadays than it would ever be. And
yeah,
in
definitely
terms
it's
of
being calibrated against recognised events and resident comments,
yeah,
and we do go out
great.
At each stage for a wide community consultation.
Excellent. Okay, and just one other quick one to Martin. If the dwellings on piers are higher, this increases the roof height of structures. Do you know how high this will be above which is acceptable under the current guidelines?
We take each one on its merits, Peter, depending upon its height. If we think it's too big, we'll ask them to lower it, basically.
Yep.
And the approach at Haberfield is that single story approach. So naturally, we'll be trying to keep that appearance and trying to get them as low as they possibly can.
Excellent. All right. And my apologies. It's obviously a lot of enthusiasm, a lot of keenness from the residents to know as much as possible. We've tried to answer every possible question. There's still quite a few yet online. I think that I'll speak to the engagement team and we'll try and get as many answers as we can through to those and up online so the community know that. Hopefully Annie, our engagement person, is nodding that we can do that and try and give you as much information as possible. So thanks for bearing with us. I'm going to hand to the councillors a minute. This is a new forum that we're trying to do and see if we can get out as much information as possible. We welcome any feedback on that as well. I think Councillor De Cruz, I was going to give the opportunity if you wanted to say anything in closing. Councillor De Cruz. No, that's okay. I'll tell you what I will do in the spirit of finishing at 6:30. I'm going to do 4 more minutes worth of questions to try and get through a few more. So instead of having us closing, and then I'll wrap and finish in 4 minutes. Thanks for my team for hanging around. What will be done to assure, Alison Casey's asked, what will be done to assure no structural disturbance, 43 and 45, with such a big excavation down the laneway? I think they might, is that O'Connor? Yeah.
Yeah, it's O'Connor Lane. That laneway is the excavation is already there. There's no further excavation going any lower than that because the culvert is already there. So what they're basically doing is going to be saw cutting the footpath that's there and taking that up, then laying the pipe and then moving along through it all. So the culvert, if you like, is already there. There's already existing pipelines in there. What the work is to do is to increase the capacity of the pipes under the laneway. So there's an additional 950 millimetre diameter pipe being installed and a 1050 pipe being installed in there. As I say, these are really specific technical questions that the best way of actually dealing with this is individual individual information for those people that so that we can actually show them those specific things. There's so much detail and technical detail associated with this. It's very difficult to do it to give these answers in a general forum.
Yeah. Thanks, Kerry. Do you know how much the drainage works are going to cost, Kerry?
I'm not sure that they've actually specified that on their application forms. Don't know.
Okay.
Don't know that.
Yeah. Okie doke. I'm just trying to see questions about have they approached lenders from Brett about chief risk officers about outlining the lending risk with the site. I don't know the answer to that. All I can say is we're trying to manage the application with the flooding information that we've got, and managing that as in accordance with the current Australian standards. Catherine Dwyer said, will up-to-date contamination studies be completed, or will council be relying on reports over 20 years old? And was flooding taken into account in the contamination reports, given the dangerous combination of hydrocarbons as a Group 1 human carcinogen with water? Probably a Kerry one. Last question.
As I said, that's the last question. Again, we've got Defence looking into this, as well as our remediation experts as well. The site's been completely sealed off for the last 20 odd years and been maintained. There's been no fly tipping. There's been no additional import of any other soils or what have you associated with it. As I say, the site audit statements clear the land for the use for residential purposes, and one of those conditions is that you can grow vegetables on them, and you just can't keep poultry. But there's been no additional soil brought in over those 20 years because the site has been completely sealed off, and the same contractors have been maintaining the land, which is Brookfields or BGIS, doing the mowing and what have you. So from what we understand from SEP 55, there is no requirement for further testing or remediation for any for the land. But again, it's a work in progress. We'll have a look into it a bit more once we've got these questions.
Thank you, Kerry. And look, I want to thank all the participants. We've had a great number of you join us today. We'd appreciate any feedback on the forum. We're hoping that this live Q&A forum gives you the opportunity as many questions. My experience with public forums, I don't think we'd be able to answer 40 questions in a public forum within the time frame we've did, and we'll try to give you as much information as possible as we assess the applicant. So we'd appreciate any feedback on that. We'll get up online and try and answer as many questions as we can. And yeah, please don't hesitate to direct any further questions through to us. But I will thank you for all attending. I'd really like to thank the staff and all award councillors, Councillor De Cruz, Councillor McKenna, and Councillor Rosidi, who attended tonight. So thank you for that, and thank you for all the staff, Kerry, James, Michael, Jai, Martin, for all attending, and the community engagement team. So thank you and have a good night. Thanks.
Recording stop.